of reference. All right, so I should be recording now, Rebecca. All right, so I'm going to keep the presentation view like this so that I can easily go back to slides over here if I need to. And I'm also going to mute you all right now. Let's see, I can do that. Or can everybody mute themselves for me? That would be easier instead of me going through you all. There should be a symbol at the top or bottom of your screen that looks like a microphone, and it should say mute on it.
Oh.
Joe Wicknick, I can mute you if you want. Rebecca. Kevin, I can mute you. Rebecca, you want me to mute you? Okay, I think everyone's muted, so I'm going to get started. Remember, if you have any questions through all of this, just text me or call me, okay? All right. So we are going to learn a lot about how we can manage our reactive dogs. Reactivity is something that is very, very, very broad. It is a huge, huge topic to cover. So I've tried my best to organize all of these thoughts by answering 3 leading questions. So the first question is going to be, what is reactivity? So we have to define it first. And then the second question I want to try and answer is, why are dogs reactive? That's a question that you guys probably have asked yourself a lot. Why is my dog acting this way? And then the third question is, how can we manage that reactivity? So how can we try and make our dogs less reactive? All right. So to answer that first question, I am going to show you videos of dogs that I feel reactive, or reacted rather. The first dog is one that is more stereotypically reactive in the sense, barking, lunging, growling, etc. This is my dog Lennox, who is reactive to dogs, people, squirrels, cats, pretty much anything that moves she will react to. So I have put her in the presence of dogs and people walking by at a distance where I know she would react. So I filmed this for you guys to see. And the video might be laggy just because we're zooming it. So hopefully you guys will still get the effect of this though. So she's huffing and growling. And then she starts to lunge, trying to pull me towards the dogs to bark. There she goes. That's pretty classical, stereotypical reactivity right there. The less common, or the less, I don't want to say it's less common, the less intuitive kind of reactivity that we see is what this other dog is doing right here. He's a little bit less vocal than that other dog was, but he's still very, very intensely focused on the dogs that he sees behind the fence at that house. So let me show you this guy. So he's not vocalizing at all, but he is definitely pulling at the leash. If those leashes weren't attached to him, he would be off and running and probably fence fighting with those dogs behind that fence. So let's talk about what reactivity is. Let's put a definition to it. These 2 definitions on the left are very long, and I've pulled them off of the internet, and you can read those while I talk about this slide. They have a lot of overlap to them. I made my own definition of this over here on the right side of the screen, and I wanted to try and keep that definition very broad. So I define reactivity as a perceived overreaction to something in the environment. Whenever I work with reactive dogs and their clients, a lot of the times the clients have a feeling of like disbelief that like, why is my dog scared of a kid? There's no reason to be scared of a kid. I would never be afraid of a kid. Why is my dog afraid of a kid? And that's a dangerous way of thinking. We don't want to invalidate our dog's fear. So just because you don't find something super scary doesn't mean that your dog doesn't find the thing super scary. Dogs can be reactive to something as silly and small as a guy wearing a hat. Okay, so it's something that can be really minute and innocuous to us, but to the dog, a guy wearing a hat has so much more meaning attached to it, and that's why the reactivity is happening. So if you ever see your dog reacting to something that you don't think is too big of a deal, don't brush it off as it not being a big deal. Instead, try and acknowledge that your dog is a different individual with a different kind of learning past and a different history. So don't invalidate their feeling and kind of shrug it off as being nothing. So reactivity, again, a perceived overreaction to something in the environment. So my dog is freaking out at something that it sees outside. These are some common triggers. I'm going to have to go into presentation mode here because I've animated it. So let me just go through all of these things. Okay, hang on. So these are some common triggers that we have. We got off-leash dogs. There are so many off-leash dogs here in Alabama. Anytime a dog comes running at my dog's off-leash, my dogs are guaranteed going to flip out. So off-leash dogs are a big thing. Cats are another thing that dogs react to. Dogs behind a fence, squirrels. Dogs on leash, people on bikes, people wearing sunglasses, kids riding bicycles and scooters, or kids just period. Cars driving by our house, dogs barking madly at the window. UPS men that come to our door to deliver packages. And then guys wearing hats or beards or mustaches, or people wearing certain big baggy clothing, or people that have walkers are common triggers for dogs. Like I said earlier, a dog can react to something that's super tiny and specific, or it can react to something that's more general and broad. Normally, I feel dogs have more than one trigger. I think it's rare that a dog just seems to have one trigger. So make sure that after this webinar, you try and figure out what triggers your dogs have. Try and make a mental list of that if you have not already. All right, so moving on, we are going to try and answer the question, why is my dog reactive? This goes deep into your dog's psyche. So trying to figure out what the root kind of emotional condition is in your dog. And there's reactivity is such a broad issue that I feel like there hasn't been a big consensus on different kinds of categories of reactive dogs. Normally it's just one label, that dog is reactive. I feel like dogs fit into one of three categories, more or less. And depending on what category they fit into, that's going to define what my therapy for the dog is. So the first step in managing your dog's reactivity is to figure out what kind of reactive dog they are. So I have made a flow chart here for you guys. And I want you guys to start at the top of this flow chart that's highlighted. And this box tells you to kind of go through all these different boxes here to figure out which kind of category of reactivity your dog is. So you might start out with the box that says, my dog has good off-leash play with other dogs that she doesn't live with. If that is the case, you would go down and read the next two gray boxes underneath of it. If that was not the case, you go over to the top right part of the screen that reads, my dog does not have good off-leash play with other dogs that she doesn't live with. And you would naturally follow the flow chart to figure out which category your dog best fits in. And these categories are color-coded. So when you get to a colored box, you're done with the flow chart. I've also included little cartoon drawings of dogs displaying different kinds of body language so that you guys are able to kind of get an idea as to the different kinds of behaviors I'm explaining in some of these boxes. So I'm going to give you guys a minute or so to go through that flow chart and figure out which kind of category rather your dog fits in. Okay. So I'm going to move on now. Keep the category that I've put your dog in mind as we move on throughout the next couple slides, okay? All right, so we want to try and figure out what our dog is trying to tell us. This information will also help us figure out what state of mind our dog is in. So the first three dogs on the top left are images that represent a relaxed dog. So this is a dog that is very neutral. The dog that's on its back, you could argue, is one that's being a little bit more submissive and doing some kind of appeasement things, trying to really hammer it down that they're not a threat to anybody. But these dogs are more or less ones that are not really showing any kind of predisposition towards any kind of reactive behavior. Past this blue line that we see here, we start to get into the territory of dogs that might be showing some predisposition to some reactive behavior. So these two dogs right here in the frustration blue category, the first dog is showing some calm observation. So it's taken notice of something in the environment, and then it's gone into a play bow. So the play bow is a way for dogs to communicate, hey, I want to interact with you, let's play. Normally, if this dog is on leash and it sees another dog on leash that it cannot interact with, and it starts to play bow and it can't go and interact with that other dog that it sees that it's trying to say, hey, I want to play with you, I want to play with you, I want to play with you, and it keeps hitting the end of that leash that you have on it, it starts to get frustrated. So dogs that demonstrate this kind of behavior before the reactive behavior that we see are normally dogs that are doing this because they're frustrated. The second line here are dogs that are all displaying some kind of fear response. And it goes kind of on a spectrum. So the dog all the way on the left is experiencing some mild stress. And as we get closer and closer and closer to the red fear box, the dog is starting to get more and more aggressive with the growling and stuff like that. And so after this growl, you might start to see some more reactive type behaviors like the barking and the lunging and the snapping kind of thing. The bottom line of dogs is meant to demonstrate the third category that I defined. And I define this category very loosely as arousal. A lot of other dog trainers might define dogs that act like this as being, quote, predatory aggressive behavior. I don't really like that term, so I just use arousal instead. And the difference with the arousal reactivity versus the other two is that we see more of like that red and white dog that I showed you in the video at the beginning. We see more of like a more quiet, kind of intense behavior. So you see the stalking in the dog, the closed mouth, and then when the dog gets closer and closer to the trigger, then we kind of unleash into the really loud reactive behavior. So these are the three categories that I've kind of defined again. So I want you guys to reflect on the body language that your dog displays when they are being reactive to try and back up whether or not your dog fits into one of these categories. Now, even though I've kind of tried to distill all of your dogs into certain categories, there is certainly overlap between different reactivity categories. But the thing that all these dogs share is stress. So all of the dogs in the previous slide right here, all of these dogs are showing some kinds of stress when they're in the presence of their trigger. So our question should be, how can we mitigate the stress? How can we try and make our dogs feel less stressed out when they're in the presence of these triggers? If we can do that, then we can help with their reactive behavior. All right, so we need to get deep here and go into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This diagram is one that I came upon a couple years ago after I was talking with a social worker who uses this a lot in their class. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have heard of this before. So this is something that's applied to human psychology, and I feel like it can also be applied to dog psychology as well. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that if a dog or a person it does not have their basic physical needs met. So if they don't have enough sleep, food, water, or shelter, they're not going to be able to feel safe and secure. If they don't feel safe and secure, they're not going to be able to have good relationships. If they don't have good relationships, they're not going to have the confidence and the self-esteem to problem solve through life situations. So we need to try and place our dogs into this hierarchy of needs state. So if I have a dog that's fear aggressive, whenever she sees a guy wearing a hat, she doesn't feel safe and secure. So I cannot expect her to have a good relationship with that person or have the confidence to problem solve by herself how to get out of that situation. So the first thing that I need to make sure that my dog feels is safe. That is goal number one. After the dog feels safe, it should be, how can I try and make her relationship with that scary thing better? And then it should be, how can I build the confidence up in the dog to where she can start to problem solve this situation on her own, okay? So always try and remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs when we go through the other kind of training components of helping the dog through the reactivity stuff, okay? Safety is number one, though. If your dog does not feel safe, everything else is not gonna go well, okay? So make sure your dog feels safe and secure first. All right. So now we're going to dive into the different kinds of reactivity categories. So for those of you that feel their dog has barrier-related reactivity, pay attention. All right, so these are my customized animations that I did, my cartoon drawings, and I'm going to narrate the scene as it unfolds. All right, so a neutral dog is walking down the street, and you are walking by with your dog. At this point, your dog can see the neutral dog walking in, and your dog thinks, oh my gosh, there's another dog that's looking at me. I really want to go and interact with him. And then your thought as the handler may be, oh, there's another dog. Fiona loves playing with dogs at the dog park, at doggy daycare. Let's see if she wants to go and greet this one. So they start to greet each other. Fiona gets super excited. She's pulling at the leash a little bit more. And mom or dad might be thinking, wow, Fiona's starting to pull me really, really hard. She's really excited and wants to go say hi. Let's make this happen. And then your dog is thinking, oh my gosh, this leash sucks. Whenever I go on a walk, I can never actually go and greet this other dog that I want to see so bad. It's starting to get uncomfortable because I'm choking myself at the end of this leash. I'm starting to become agitated. I don't know if I like this situation anymore. So at that point, the amount of stress that the dog is feeling because it's being confined by that leash and not able to go and see the other dog, the dog's emotional state of mind is switching to one of being happy and carefree to one that is now more agitated and annoyed and stressed out, okay? And that's where it all falls apart. So then your dog, your reactive dog starts to freak out, starts lunging and barking at this other dog. And all the while, that dog that you saw walking up the street is still standing right there. So your dog is starting to freak out and say, this dog is still here. I'm really uncomfortable right now. I really got to unleash my aggressive behavior to let this dog know that I am uncomfortable. So I'm going to start barking and lunging and growling to try and get this dog away. And all the while your dog is doing this, it still feels that pressure on the end of that leash. So that stress is climbing and climbing and climbing. So you as the owner might think, why is my dog growling? My dog plays great with dogs at doggy daycare and the dog park. Why is this different? She must be being mean. So then what people sometimes do is they start to punish their dog. They start to yell at them. They might yank on their collar. If your dog's on a prong collar or a shock collar, you might administer the pain of those collars as a discipline to the dog. And that makes the dog even more stressed. And that convinces the dog that this situation is a bad one. So it reinforces the dog's idea to be upset and stressed out and be reactive. So you don't want to get mad at your dog when they do this, because whenever you do, you're just making the situation even worse, and you're fulfilling the dog's prophecy that it's laid out. Every time I see a dog on the leash, this bad situation happens, so I should keep treating it like it is a bad situation. All right, so those are frustrated greeter dogs. That's a pretty stereotypical interaction of a frustrated greeter. and it goes away. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is arousal related reactivity. All right, so we have a dog that's going on a walk, and normally dogs that are easily aroused, whenever you take them outside, bam, they immediately start to be hypervigilant. They're looking everywhere. It's hard to really kind of redirect them off of something else. So this dog that I have in this drawing right here, tail is up, wagging a little bit fast, and its eyes are straight forward, ears are up. It is on alert, okay? And so all of a sudden it sees another dog walking up, and this dog, bam, laser focuses on this new dog and starts pulling on that leash even harder. Because the dog is starting to freak out at the presence of this other dog, its emotions are just going out the roof, and it starts climbing and climbing and climbing in stress. And so the owner's thought is to tighten up on that leash even more to feel like they have more control over the dog, which makes the dog even more stressed out. All right, so the dog starts to freak out even more, even more, even more. It might start jumping up and down or lunging, okay? And then all of a sudden, it starts to go into that stalk mode. As the other dog approaches, the other dog starts to stalk towards it, hyper-focus on it. And I believe that the dogs start to do this because they want to try and zone in and really only worry about that other dog in the environment, okay? Everything else, they have blinders on. All they can see is this other dog. Nothing else matters because this other dog that they see is the most stressful thing in their world right now. So they hone in and they laser focus on it. And I feel like a lot of these dogs do this because they just don't understand what else they could do with this other dog. They don't understand how to have an appropriate social interaction, or they haven't been socialized well with other dogs or had a bad experience. So they are super zoned in and stressed at this other dog, okay? And then when the other dog stays close to that other dog, the reactive dog starts to lunge and bark and try and get even closer, and it just goes downhill from there, okay? The owner starts to get embarrassed at the reactive dog jumping up and acting a fool. All the while, their reactive dog is just struggling so hard to come back down from their elevated high state of emotion. They just don't know how to process all of these emotions that they're having. Okay, and then at the end of this interaction, owners usually still discipline their dog. A lot of the times, owners will scramble to try and figure out how they have some control over their dog. They might yell at their dog to sit or to heel. They might yank the dog on the leash. The dog is wearing a prong collar or a shock collar, and that pain is administered to the dog. It makes it even more stressful, and the dog is reinforced that next time it sees another dog, that it's not going to be a good interaction. Okay. The last kind of reactivity category is fear-based reactivity. So we have that neutral dogging coming up, and then we have our fear-reactive dog. So our fear-reactive dog has that loose leash right there. It's not pulling, yanking at the leash. It does not want to voluntarily approach this other dog because our fear-reactive dog is thinking, I hope that other dog does not come closer to me. I don't trust them. I hope it doesn't see me. I am going to try and walk by this dog without it paying any mind to me. And that is sharply contrasted by the handler who thinks, oh my gosh, Fiona should go and see this other dog. She is so antisocial. I want to try and make her have friends. So owners sometimes drag these fear-reactive dogs over to the neutral dog. When that happens, the fear-reactive dog is feeling like all of its boundaries are being violated. The thing that it didn't want to have happen is happening. It's coming into closer contact with this neutral dog. So the fear-reactive dog starts to get reactive and starts to really tell off this neutral dog, starts to say, I feel uncomfortable, go away, go away, go away, do not come closer to me, which makes the fear-reactive dog handler freak out. And sometimes correct the dog for having that reactive behavior, which of course is scary for the fear-reactive dog, and it just reinforces the fear-reactive dog's idea that it should be fearful. okay? So those are all the different kinds of reactivity categories that I've mapped out. Again, some dogs overlap in these different categories. Some dogs can situationally be more fear reactive instead of more arousal-based reactive. So keep that in mind as we go through all of this. The continuity, again, in all of those different categories is dogs were stressed out, and owners disciplining their dogs for being stressed out just made the dog even more stressed out, okay? So let's talk about how we can manage the reactivity. So the goal for our dogs is to have them look at the scary thing in their environment and not react. So Lennox is my red and white cattle dog right here, and she is very reactive towards people she doesn't know. So this is a man that she's never met before that has a weed whacker, which might make him even more scary. And you'll see in the video that Lennox goes to think to react to him, but decides to come away from him and come back to me. So let's see. So she thinks about barking at him, but decides to turn around back to me instead. So there was no reactivity there. And that took a lot of time for her to get good at. That took a lot of time. Okay, so but that's a goal that we have. And Jill, I just saw your message about the images on the flowchart. I can do that for you later at the end of the webinar, okay? All right, moving on. We're going to talk about training. So whenever we manage or whenever we work with behavior modification, there's different aspects. There's training and management. So I'm going to show you different training exercises for you. All right, the first thing you need to do is try and figure out what your dog loves. So what motivates your dog? And those motivations are food, toys, attention from pet parents. Food is something that is most easily given to dogs in training sessions, so try and figure out what food your dog likes the most. And break out the chicken and the cheese for them. It doesn't have to be milk bones. Chicken and cheese is a lot better than milk bones for your dog. So try and figure out what your dog loves the most. And then try and map out what your dog's triggers are. So we want to make a list of both of those things so that we know when to bring the chicken. If we are going to the park where we know there's going to be kids out on bikes and that is one of the triggers for your dogs, that means that you need to bring your chicken then, okay? So it's meant for you to map out your dog so that you know how to best prepare for the training session, all right? Moving on. We are going to look at different training exercises that you can do with your dog. One of the first things that I like to do with reactive dogs is something called the gravity game, and it helps with making a more chaotic-minded dog into a more calm-minded dog. So this is a video that I shot with a dog that I just met the other day. It's a half an hour long video. We're not going to watch the whole video. I'm going to jump forward to a specific part in it though. And we're loading. And the point of this exercise is to allow the dog to go out into their environments and explore things and get distracted and lost in it. Try and figure out what their surroundings are so that they feel safe. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I want them to explore it to feel safe, but I also want to reinforce the dog for coming back to me. I want the dog to feel like I can be the center of their world and I can provide some comfort to them and I can offer them another behavior that they can do in the midst of things that might stress them out. And that behavior is just coming back to me and to check in with me. So that's what you'll see this dog will do. This dog has a lot of anxiety. So she's starting to smell in the air. She's caught a smell of something. And I'm just letting her do it. And the moment she makes a decision to break away from following through on what she's doing in her environment, kind of entertaining the idea to get distracted, the moment she makes the decision to come back to me, I give her a treat for that. And when I took this dog from this kennel environment, she would not eat food in this room because she was so stressed out. So it took her a long time to feel safe in her environment, and the way that I feel she felt safe was being allowed to explore it. And you can see she starts to come and check back in with me more and more quickly. And that's evidence that she has learned that there is another behavior that I can do when I'm in the midst of all of these distracting things in my environment. And that behavior is checking back in with me. So that's something that's really good for you guys to practice. Just kind of sitting outside in your front lawn, watching the world go by, and letting your dog watch it with you. Whenever when she decides to come back in to check on you, you reinforce that decision. Okay, so in addition to that center of gravity gain that helps create some calm in the midst of chaos, we can also do some desensitization work. Desensitization work means we are trying to make the trigger not so big of a deal. So we do this by pairing something the dog likes. Remember that boiled chicken, that cheese, when they see the scary thing in the environment. So that's what I'm doing with Linux in this video. And apologies if this video is laggy. So I'm going to skip forward. This is called desensitization again. We're desensitizing the dog to the scary thing in the environment. We're trying to make it a good thing and not a bad thing. All right. So in this video, I have Linux. Remember my dog that struggles with trusting people and other dogs. And we're at the park and we're just sitting down chilling. And whenever I feel like she has taken notice of a person or another dog in the environment, I am going to say the word yes and give her a treat. All right, so let's see that. So I just said yes and I gave her a treat. And I want you guys to try and pay attention to the way that her face looks. Her ears will perk up straight. She might close her mouth and hold her breath when she looks at the thing. Oops, sorry guys. So she sees the person running. She sees a man walking on that track over there. And I say yes and I toss her a treat. So it's whenever she sees the scary thing, I'm just going to say the word yes and give her food. There it is. Yes and treat. And I do this in the hopes that eventually she'll look at the scary thing with something that's pleasant instead of something that's scary. So whenever she sees a man walking, that is a precursor for her getting something she loves, which is food. And I needed to make sure that I was at a distance that was far enough away to where she wasn't so stressed out she was having a reactive outburst. That's really important. I'm not going to expect her to be okay with that man walking up to her and petting her quite yet, okay? I can expect her to be okay with it 200 feet away or so, though. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to teach you guys is 3 different kinds of basic obedience things that you can do with your dog. And this is going to transport us to YouTube, so I'm going to have to share a new screen with you guys. Let's see. So bear with me as I do that. Come on. Oh, I hear it, but I don't see it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not seeing it on here. Okay, so I'll just talk to you guys about it then. All right, so the first thing that you can teach your dogs is the word yes. And the word yes, again, means that you've done something good. I like that you looked at that dog calmly. And the way that we teach it is by just saying yes and then giving them a treat. Yes, treat, yes, treat, yes, treat. The second thing that's good to teach the dog is watch. And watch is cute eye contact. So we're going to take food in our hand, bring it to the dog's nose, and then right up to their face, right up to our face. So treat to the dog's nose, up to our forehead. And as we bring that treat up to our forehead, we're going to say watch. And then when they do look at us, we say yes and give them a treat. The third thing is turn. Turn simply means we're going to run away and turn in the complete opposite direction of the trigger. So you're walking down an aisle in PetSmart and out of nowhere, a 6.5-month-old Labradoodle puppy comes lunging at you at the end of a 20-foot retractable lead, and you have your reactive dog there. In that situation, you're just going to say turn and run backwards in the opposite direction. And that allows your dog to turn around with you and follow you away. And that's a really important thing that you should teach to get out of an emergency situation. All right, so we have the desensitization, and then we also have the yes and the watch and the turn. And now we're going to learn how to do the counter conditioning stuff. So the counter conditioning stuff means that we're going to teach the dog to do something other than barking and lunging. And the easiest thing that I found to teach is eye contact. So that's where the watch comes into play. So in this video, you will see me bridge, yes, and at the desensitization, and also the watching, so that I can allow my dog to learn how to do something other than just react. Okay, so let's look at this video right here. All right. So she's looking at something in the distance. Let me do that again. Hang on. All right. So she sees something in the distance. So I'm going to say the word yes. And I'm going to bring a piece of food to her nose and then back up to my face. So she sees something in the distance. I say yes. And with that same treat, I'm going to bring it up to my face and say watch at the same time. And I'm just waiting for her to look at something. There it is. Yes. Watch. Yes. Good job. And if we do that enough and enough and enough, eventually we won't have to ask her to watch our face. She'll do it automatically. So again, we're looking at a trigger. Let me show you one more time. We're looking at a trigger. We're saying yes. Watch. Yes, you did watch me. There's your reward. So that's called counter conditioning. We're teaching Linux that she can do something else other than barking and lunging. And if we practice that enough, then the dog will start to do it automatically. And that's what we can see in this next video. All right. So let's watch Linux give us some auto watches. All right. So in this video, Linux has befriended one of my coworkers, Anthony. She didn't always like him, so it's a good thing for Linux to have finally trusted him. It took a lot of work. So Linux is now working for Anthony in this video, and what we'll see is a maintenance worker will be riding by on a four-wheeler behind this fence, and that is a huge trigger for Linux normally. And you'll see that Linux will start to look at Anthony for a reward after she sees the trigger, and Anthony won't have to say anything at all. Okay, so let's watch that happen. This is the goal. So she just did it there, and he rewarded her for it, and he's waiting for her to look again. And in the next couple of minutes, this utility vehicle will come really, really, really close to Linux. So I'm not going to expect her to perform the behavior that I was talking about. That's too hard for her. She's not ready for that yet. So I've asked Anthony to just feed her, to distract her while the scary thing goes by really close. And then when it starts to pass at a distance that I feel Linux is able to work through, then I'll ask Anthony to stop feeding her and see if she will offer that eye contact. So she looked at it, and because I've trained her to do this, she will look at the trigger and back at Anthony because she knows that's something else that she can do. Bam, she did it. And that is the goal behavior here. Wouldn't it be awesome if our reactive dogs, instead of barking and lunging at the trigger, would look at us instead? That is the goal here. But we have to do it slowly. We have to do it through lots of baby steps. We have to have realistic expectations for them. And we have to systematically get closer and closer and closer to those triggers. And it will happen. Lennox has gotten so much better in her reactivity, but I work her at this almost every day. Certainly every time I go out in public with her, I always carry treats and I always work her reactivity. So it's something that takes a lot of patience and diligence, but it does pay off. All right, so let's look into management now. Remember, there are several different components. Well, there's two different components when we're working with behavior modification. There's training and management. Management involves using tools. So in my opinion, there's no magical tool that can help prevent reactivity. There's no harness that prevents pulling that can help with reactivity. There's no like magical spell I can say to help your dog not be reactive anymore. So there's no easy answer with tools. However, there are tools that make it worse. The tools that make it worse are tools that cause pain. So people that have reactive dogs on a prong collar, if they're pulling towards that dog to try and communicate stress, that they're stressed out, and then when they do that, they get another layer of pain from pulling via the prong collar, that's going to make stress go up, not go down. The choke chains, people put the choke chains on the dog. I feel like they use them to administer lots of leash corrections, like with the prong collar. So they're relying on the collar to be uncomfortable to prevent the dog from doing the behavior. And if we're working with a dog that is stressed out already, adding pain and discomfort is only going to make them more stressed. So choke chains are also not a help. Shock collars are also terrible for reactive dogs. They administer pain as well. If we're shocking a dog that's stressed out at seeing another dog and our goal is to have the dog like the sight of other dogs and not stress out, shocking them for their reaction is not going to make it any better. Retractable leashes and reactive dogs is a bad combination as well. When we have dogs that are lunging and pulling and we're trying to be really, really mindful of how close our reactive dogs are to their triggers, having them at the end of a retractable leash where they control the distance is very dangerous, and those retractable leashes can slide right out of your hands so quick. So the best kinds of tools for reactivities are ones that add security. So they're not magic, they're not going to stop pulling or anything like that. They're just going to make you feel more secure. The freedom harnesses are great for that. They have 2 points of attachment, so you feel like your dog is not going to slip out of that harness. The Easy Walk harness is also good. I like the little martingale, the slip part on this fastener right here. And then having a 4 or 6 foot lead is going to be the best. The longer your leash is, the more you're going to feel your dog pull at the end of it. So if your dog hits the end of a 20-foot retractable lead lunging at another dog, you're probably going to get pulled down or hurt. If you're on a 4-foot lead, you're going to feel like you have more control over the dog and you're probably not going to fall down as easily. So again, there is no magical tool that can help prevent reactivity. There are only tools that make it worse and tools that can make you feel more secure. The other aspect of management, in addition to tools, is prevention. So try your best to prevent your dog from going into situations where you know there's going to be a lot of scary things. So I would never take my reactive dog to a park on a day that looks like this. Instead, I would walk my reactive dog at night where I feel like most people are not walking. You can do it in the morning or late at night, just times of the day where you know people aren't going to be out. That's the best thing to do, because the more that we can prevent the dog from performing the reactive behavior, the more we're going to be able to convince the dog that there are positive outcomes that can happen when you see another dog. And we just have to be prepared for that, and we have to set our dogs up for success for that. So if you go tomorrow to a park like this with your dog that's reactive, they're not going to do well. But if you go here to a park at night where there's no other dogs and maybe you might see one person walking in the distance, you're going to have a better walk and your dog's going to have a positive experience. So prevention is key as well. The other aspect of this is teamwork. You guys are a team. You know, me and Lennox working as a team, I recognize what her kind of weaknesses are. And her weaknesses are seeing other dogs and people. That's what makes her scared. So it's my job as her teammate to make her feel safe, because I feel like I can help her make her feel safe. And so I'm going to try and do that. So in order to be in a team, you have to act like a teammate. And the way that you do this is you set your dog up for success. I'm not going to take Lennox into PetSmart and expect her to like every dog or person there or never bark. That would be stupid of me, because I know that she would be really scared and stressed out in the environment. So I'm going to be a good teammate and not force her to deal with that. I'm also going to try and scope out the environment for potential triggers so that I can get ready with my treats to try and make it a positive experience for her and not a negative one. I'm always going to bring food with me. There's no shame in that. I think that if I can have my dog be less reactive by always bringing hot dogs with me, that's okay. That's not a big strain on me to always bring hot dogs with me. I avoid trigger-dense places. I have realistic expectations, and I try and work her at a distance where I feel she's successful. And I understand the importance of having baby steps. You know, I'm not going to do too much too soon with her. I'm going to work at her own pace. Even though I wish she was progressing faster, I'm not going to force her to work faster. It's all about her. Which leads us into kind of a mantra that we can have in mind here: mechanical, motivational, and spiritual. If we can make sure that our training with the dog is really clear, our communication is really nice and clear, then we can help our dog feel less stressed out because they know what to expect. If we know how to motivate our dog with a chicken, the cheese, with toys or something, if we know how to motivate them to try and get them to have a different perspective, that's key. And then it's also spiritual. With a lot of these reactive dogs, especially ones that are really scared or really stressed out, your dog has to trust you and have a bond with you already. So if your dog doesn't trust you, it's going to be a lot harder for your dog to look at you as a source of comfort when they're in the middle of a stressful situation. So try and make sure that you are working towards all of these three things so that you can become a better team with your dog. Even though I feel like I packed a lot of information into this webinar, it's important that you work with a positive reinforcement-based professional dog trainer with this behavior modification training. Reading a book or listening to a webinar is not going to have you do it 100% right. So I want to make sure that if you decide to continue on with doing some modification training with your dog, you do it with a trainer. For those of you that don't live in Alabama, I can look up some trainers in your area that are certified by the right people to make sure that they're going to be positive based. And then finally, before I open the floor to questions, I am going to go through some that I commonly hear. One of the first questions is, when do I get to stop carrying food with me? I feel like you should always carry reinforcement with your dog. Again, if Lennox can be made to feel more safe and secure and have a positive outlook on things that scare her by me just carrying hot dogs with me, I'm going to do that. The moment that I stop reinforcing the non-reactive behavior that I trained her for, she might revert back to a reactive behavior. So I think it's important to always carry reinforcements with you. What do I do if my dog isn't food motivated? I would argue that your dog is probably really stressed out. So sometimes dogs that just put the leash on and go out their front door on their porch, they're not even in the park yet or seeing a dog behind a fence. I think they're not eating because they're already stressed out because they've already aroused themselves. So I would not go on the walk until my dog is voluntarily eating some kind of high value food reward. I think it's very strange for a dog to not want to eat boiled chicken. There are some dogs that like toys just more than they like food. So if you know you have like a dog that's crazy over balls, you can try and use a tennis ball instead of food. Food is nice though, because if we have a dog that's fetch crazy and we use a tennis ball and we bring that tennis ball out in the midst of a situation that's already really tense and really arousing for the dog, showing them that tennis ball is going to make them even more aroused. Food, unless you have a dog that's crazy about food, and I mean really crazy about food, food isn't going to significantly increase that arousal as much as the tennis ball might. When can I go off leash with my dog that is reactive? I would say you never should rely on your reactive dog to ever really feel comfortable being off leash. Going off leash is something that always has a lot of inherent risk attached to it. So I would always caution you guys to ever take your dog off leash in a public area. Another common question is my dog like this because of her breed? People that have pit bull terriers or herding dogs typically struggle with reactivity. You know, Chihuahuas have a reputation for being really barky and stuff. I would caution to say that breed determines whether or not a dog's going to be more reactive or not. I think I can say that breed can determine whether or not a dog is going to be more inclined to interact with its environments, or be more, I don't know, like I have a beagle mix who could care less about anything. Like she's like a lump on a log. So a cat could run by or a squirrel could fall out of a tree and she'll just look at it and sigh and fall asleep, which I think is strange for a beagle that wants to go and hunt and smell things. She doesn't want to do that. I have a pit bull terrier that could care less about interacting negatively with other dogs. She's just afraid of people, which counteracts the stereotype of pit bulls to have. So I don't think breed is necessarily a predictor of a dog being reactive or not. Can I get another dog in my home with a reactive dog? I used to live with 6 dogs. I live with 4 now. Of those 6 dogs that I had, 4 of the 6 were reactive to people or other dogs. So I think that if you do it right and under the guidance of a trainer, that you could introduce another dog into your home with your reactive dog. But it's something that you have to watch and make sure that you get the match right. Because I think a lot of it is about trust. So once your reactive dog trusts that other dog in the home, normally interactions are good. Can I send my reactive dog away to get trained by someone else? I don't really think that that works well. Remember, we're going back to this slide about teamwork. If you want to send your dog off to become a part of a team with the board and trained trainer, then yeah, but your dog's living with you. The dog is yours. You are the teammate to your dog, not the board and trained trainer. So I would caution you against that for sure. That is the end of my presentation. So I am going to unmute you all and open it up for some conversation. So let me stop sharing. And thank you guys for hanging in there with me. Let's see. Or I guess everyone can just unmute themselves. That's easier. And let's see. Jill, I'll unmute you for yourself. Rebecca's on here twice. Kevin, I'll unmute you. So if anyone has a question, please speak up. Whoever speaks up first, I'll answer your question. If you guys don't have any questions, feel free to end the meeting. I did record this, so I can send this recording to you later for reference if you like. Yeah, and if you have any other questions that you think of later, just email me and let me know.
Hey, Meredith,
Jill, take Jill's question first. Yes, Jill?
My dog sees his triggers from inside the house.
Yeah.
So I can't really get him away from those. How do I deal with that?
So yeah, I think that's definitely some barrier related stuff. And it's hard when your dog is in the house and barking, because if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, that distance is more or less set for you, right? So prevention is going to be one of your best friends here. So that when you are exposing your dog to that person walking outside of your house, you can be in control of the training session. You might have your dog on leash in those intentional training sessions so that you can control the distance of the dog to the person in the window. So in times when you're not training, which is going to be probably 95% of the time, you're going to rely on the prevention there. So people that have very reactive dogs in that way, sometimes they put a window film on their window so that the dog cannot see out of the window and visually recognize the person walking down the street. They can't see them. Some people will put their dog in a room that does not have a window that is looking out on the main street, so they don't see a lot of pedestrian traffic. So it's pretty much just blocking the dog's visual, or if it's an auditory thing, being able to see or hear the trigger. If it's an auditory thing, running box fans or running the TV is good. I leave my dogs watching the Disney Channel when I go to work, and I crank it up so that they don't hear car doors slam, they don't hear the backyard dogs barking. Box fans are also really good. So it's trying to prevent your dog from having that reaction to their trigger when you're not doing an intentional training session. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. All right, and then I think the person calling in, phone number 6980, the last 4 digits. So do you have a question for us?
I do. This is Stephanie.
Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, the question I have is when you were showing the slide,
Mm-hmm.
and if your dog is not food motivated, what was the answer to that?
So if your dog is not food motivated, I would do a little experiment with them. So in a situation where there's little to no stressor, so in your kitchen after this webinar happens, when most people are up and not walking around the street, it's really low energy in your house. I want to see if your dog will eat the training treats that you have. If they do not eat the training treats that you have, see if they'll eat something higher value like cheese or boiled chicken, something that they normally don't get to have every day. If your dog is not eating boiled chicken off your kitchen floor at 8:30 at night, I would wonder then, did he eat a lot during the day? Is this a dog that always has access to food? You know, is there a food bowl that's left out all the time and it can eat however much it wants, so it's never hungry? And then if that's not the case, if you do feedings where you just put the bowl of food down and they eat all that food up, and you take the bowl up and they don't have access to eating food all day, your dog's still not eating that chicken, I would start to wonder, is there any kind of just underlying stress that's going on? Does the dog have underlying anxiety? And if that's not the case, then I might try and whip out a hot dog or ham or roast beef, some other kind of high value meat. But I feel like a dog that doesn't voluntarily eat boiled chicken, cheese, steak, ham, anything like that, there's something that's going on there. So why don't you talk to me more about your dog's eating habits? Do you feel like your dog would eat a piece of boiled chicken off the floor tonight at 8:30?
Yeah, she will eat chicken and ham and steak and beef, but it's when she gets into that hypersensitive arousal state that she has no intention of paying attention to you or the food, and that's why we say crate, and she'll go to a crate and she calms down.
Oh, that's good that she'll go to a crate then. And I would say she's not eating that chicken or beef because she is so stressed out. So whenever I'm really stressed out or having a panic attack or something, my appetite goes away for the next couple of hours. I'm not going to want to eat anything because I was so stressed out. I'm not going to be hungry. That's just something that the body does. So that's probably why she's not eating that stuff when she's going crazy. So you would have to try and work her at a distance to where she's not so stressed out to where she's not going to eat. So I would try and set her up that way. So figure that out, whether it's 50 feet away from the scary thing, 20 feet, 100 feet, you got to figure out what that distance is. Any other questions?
Okay.
Sorry.
It's just people walking down the street.
Yeah, so that sounds like you have what Jill had going on. So you're going to have to make sure that you cover up your windows so she can't see those people coming by, or put her away in an area of the house to where she doesn't have access to that sight line of people walking by the street. And then in the time that you do have to intentionally train for the reactivity, you're going to allow her to see all of those things that she normally would react to, but you're going to have her on leash so that she's not able to charge up at that window to react. You might have her on leash. You have like an open concept floor plan, and you have a living room that faces the street, and your kitchen is on the other side of that open floor plan area. Have your dog on leash in your kitchen so she can still see out the window, but she's 30 feet away from it instead of right up on it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
All right, any other questions, guys? Yes, Kristen? You want me to unmute you? Okay. Let's see. All right, you're unmuted. You should be.
Perfect. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. So I'm a foster for the Humane Society, and actually I'm a foster failure for the Humane Society since I've got numerous dogs now. But I've got my 2 reactionary dogs. One of them is a pit bull, and she's fairly large now.
Yeah.
And the other is a hound shepherd, and he's probably just a little bit less weight than she is, the pit bull.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is that he could hear a leaf drop and he will go completely bonkers. And I work from home a lot, but granted I have a big old fenced in backyard. And so I leave the door open because I can. But every time he goes out running, I try to correct him, but she kind of mothers him and jumps on him, and it just makes it a whole lot worse.
Yeah. So in my house, if I have Kobe, my Australian Shepherd, and Lennox, my cattle dog that you can see asleep on the floor right there, if they are running at the fence line together because they hear my neighbor's dog out, I have to take one of those dogs out of the situation, or else what it's called is they're going to redirect on each other. So if Lennox bumps into Kobe and Kobe's really, really stressed out and over-aroused, and then Lennox bumps into him, Kobe is going to put all his frustration onto her and be aggressive. It's kind of like guys in a mosh pit or a bunch of drunk dudes in a bar. They get drunk and they bump into each other. And then one of them is like, yo, bro, what'd you do? And the other one grabs them up. And then before you know it, they're all out brawling each other. That's what redirected aggression is like. So if you know that's going to happen, I don't know if you can know. I can know when my neighbors are taking their dog out because I hear them before they go out. So I have the luxury of knowing that. So if I know that's happening, I call both of them in actually, so that I can prevent that from happening. But yeah, when you have multiple dogs in the home that are both reactive, redirected aggression is a very common thing. So you're just going to have to use your management there. And then you can try and train both of them to be a little bit more comfortable in the presence of that. One of the best things that I do for the training is I have them on a leash, a long line, and I let them hear the other dog out. They're not able to charge that fence line, just like dogs that are barking in windows. They're not able to charge at that window. I have them on a leash, and I try and see if I can work them at that distance away from the fence to where they're eating from me, and I can ask them to do other things like watch me or turn away from the thing, So try and work them at that distance and then gradually get closer and closer and closer. But yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of management there. And it's going to be inconvenient, but that's what you have to do. Any other questions? If you guys think of any more, let me know. Oh, I see Ashley said, and a lot of people are like, unmute me. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm unmuting everybody.
Yay!
Yay! Sorry, guys. Okay, Ashley, do you have any questions?
No, Sammy just wanted to say hi.
Okay. Is everyone good? Everyone's good. If you think of any questions later, please let me know. And I recorded this whole thing again, so I will send it to you so you can use it as a point of reference. And I always want to be a resource to you guys. So those of you that don't live in Alabama, please reach out to me, okay? All right. I'm going to end the meeting now, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.